Anonymous asks, are there any good rational arguments against polygamy? Now, I don't know if he means polygamy specifically, like marrying multiple people, or just polyamory in general, where you have relationships with multiple people. So I'm going to assume it's the second one. The biggest issue is the way we have relationships has developed over thousands of years. And if you want to do something different than the normal thing, there are a lot more ways to be wrong than right. There are more errors than correct answers. There's more ways to screw up than to make things better. So if you want to make a change to something important and make a significant change, then you need to know what the fuck you're doing. And poly communities in general have no idea what they're doing and make a mess of it. Knowing what you're doing for something of this difficulty level requires... Okay, so there's two different ways to do it, sort of, or there's two factors. But if you're doing it on pure skill, just I'm so smart and rational, I know what I'm doing, I can deal with this, you need a philosophy skill somewhere in the ballpark of where I am. Maybe a bit less, but that leaves, maybe a dozen people could do it in the world right now. So it's a bad idea. It's way too hard for people. It's beyond people's rationality. They do not understand philosophy and problem solving and all that shit well enough. And to do polygamy, you would need like at least 3 people that were that smart. They all have to be that smart. If 2 of them are smart and one of them is dumb, you're going to have big problems because the dumb one is going to fuck things up and not understand what's going on and cause problems. So it's basically impossible because there aren't good enough people, including you. Like, it's not just the other people are bad. You don't know enough. If there were people that knew more, they would write books and have philosophy discussions and so on, and they would be visible in the world. So that is the level of difficulty we're talking about. It's just way too hard, and also it's not worth it. Even if you could do it, there are better things to put a large amount of effort into, like life extension. Why put a bunch of effort into making poly work, even if you were skilled enough, instead of putting that same effort into life extension research? And there are plenty of other important causes, like spreading capitalism. So I think it's kind of a waste of resources. Like, where's the upside? Like, the reason people see upside in poly is that they think love and sex are super important. And that's wrong. And to the extent it's important, like 99% of the importance comes from the traditions. So if you're going to follow the traditions, then it's important and you should do traditional stuff. Don't be poly. On the other hand, if you're going to disregard these traditions, then you lose both you lose the prohibition on poly, but you also lose the reason to want to sleep with a bunch of people or to think love and romance are important. So if you're going to throw out the prohibitions, you should also throw out the other part of the tradition that says that stuff is so important. They go together. They're related things. So if you're going to try to improve things on the tradition, I would generally recommend being less involved with that kind of thing rather than more involved. There are better things to focus your life on. Okay, so back to what I was saying earlier. In terms of pure skill, there's not enough people. However, there's a second major factor, which is like your personal inclination. Like, some people are just more into that kind of thing. It's easier for them. It fits their personality better. It fits their current situation. Like, a lot of people, it's temporary. Like, in their early 20s, they're more into that kind of thing. And then when they're 30, they're not into it anymore. And it's like, okay, so it was easy for a few years when you weren't looking for a real marriage or a long-term relationship. So anyways, if you factor in that it's convenient for someone, they happen to like it already for whatever reason, stuff like that, then the skill level required for it to sort of work goes way down. It's still generally a bad idea and people usually make a mess of it, but it's like maybe 1 in 1,000 people could do okay when it was really convenient. Whereas if they just had to do it from pure skill with no convenience, then it's more like 1 in 1 billion. So if you want to like sleep around a bunch in your early 20s when it's semi-traditional to do so, and if you're like inclined in that direction, I wouldn't recommend it, but you're probably not going to destroy your life. Whereas if you're like actually looking for a polygamous marriage that's supposed to last like 50 years and that's what you want to be doing when you're 40 or 50 or whatever, you're probably going to fuck up your life and put a ton of effort into something that's not that important in the big scheme of things. Like having some friends with benefits in your youth is one thing. And trying to be like polygamous as like a serious, major, important part of your life is something much different, harder, and both like dangerous and not beneficial. People need more reason in their lives, not more sex. They don't need more like emotion triggers. People should spend more of their time online having like thoughtful discussions and reading books and that kind of stuff, rather than spending more of it having relationship drama with a larger number of people in person. There are other issues with this stuff. People get pressured into it. Vulnerable people get pushed into things that they don't really want. Some people are told that it's rational and they don't know how to argue against it, but they're not comfortable with it, and then they get pressured into it, and that's bad. You should not be pushing it on people just because they're bad at debating things and they don't know how to say no. Like, we live in a culture with certain customs and traditions, and people know how to live in that culture, and then when you do something different, it's really easy to hurt other people who don't know how to deal with you when you're acting non-traditional and weird. And people often don't tell you when you're hurting them or they don't understand what's going on. It's very easy to hurt people without realizing it when you refuse to follow the normal ways of interacting with other people. When you do something different, someone else might have a bad time and it can be your fault. And it's easy to not realize you're doing that and hurting a lot of people. I think that youthful like party and hookup culture is on the whole a bad idea. Like when you got serial monogamy, but you're like you switch partners frequently, it starts to blur the lines towards poly, and then when things get hazy enough, like you get back together with someone after breaking up with them a little while later, like 2 weeks later, and now you're like switching back and forth between partners. That gets like very similar to poly because you keep switching partners, including it's like partner A, then partner B, then partner A, then partner C, then partner A again, and then partner B again, and stuff like that happens. It starts looking less and less like serial monogamy. So I understand how people like blur the lines and slide into something that's a bit more poly when they're doing that stuff, but I don't think that stuff makes their lives better. They're just chasing fun. And the proper way to get like positive emotions is to have rational values and pursue them. And sleeping with a bunch of women, or the female equivalent of like attracting a bunch of men, like being what they want so they like you. It's similar on both sides. You try to get social status and impress members of the opposite sex and like have your pick of who to sleep with and outcompete people in a popularity contest. Like all that stuff it's not deep, it's not thoughtful, it's not what matters in life. You should value other things.